you'd be amazed at how many people skip this stuff about getting a guitar sound in the studio. Come into the studio with your gear prepped, your amp and your guitar. Make sure your guitar is intonated. I mean, how many in the early days, you rolled in, no guitar's not even in the case. You're just like kind of dragging it. Like you go, it's just guy walks in just like with the guitar, like, hey, right?
Throw it on the floor.
Throw it on the floor. Guitar's all duct taped up and just like, you know, and it's just, no, but it's true. Like you'd be amazed. And I dealt with that more times than not, especially in the early days. We're dealing with like a lot of the punk bands and stuff like that. Guys roll in, the guitar's not in the case. It's so just out of whack. Like, you know, no matter where you go on the fret, the strings are like this high up on off the fretboard. And,
yeah, we
you know,
waste a lot of time on things like that.
Yeah, you'd be amazed at how much time you spend like just on tuning, like, and getting intonation right and everything like that. So
and playing things in different spots than you really want to, just because you have to, because you can't.
Because
buzzing
you have
there,
to.
So
right.
let's transpose it.
Right.
You know, that's not that productive.
Or the nightmare of like improper intonation. And it's like where I've had to do it, where it's just the most grueling, agonizing thing, where you're literally punching in like almost a chord at a time, because like this chord sounds in, you know, but move up 3 frets and it's out.
So you got to
like,
tune it differently for that. Each chord has to be tuned
tune the guitar to the chord.
We've done that more than I'd like to.
I know.
Admit.
It's exactly, because like some of the high stuff, you know, like when you get up there where it gets really weird.
It's not prom anymore.
It's not right. Well, we'll delve into that a little bit, but intonated, really go to a guy. You know, if you there's resources on the internet to show you. You can do it yourself. You can intonate a guitar yourself, but it's best, especially if you're not familiar, at least bring it to a guy that you trust. Bring it to, there's plenty of guys, even at the big music chains, they can refer to you at Guitar Center. I think they usually have an in-house guitar.
Yeah, and even nowadays, there's always like online, some kid just likes doing that stuff.
Look for ads, look for
$100
people.
I'll do all 5 of your guitars. I love this stuff.
But if you just Google guitar shops, you could find a guy somewhere close to you that will intonate your guitar. Dressing the frets, which is also important. Like if they need to file the frets down, because sometimes eventually over the times, frets get worn out because it's metal on metal. They will eventually get flat spots and soft spots in them, and you need to file the frets down and just make sure everything it's all even. The response is even all the way up and down the neck. And they'll adjust the neck if the neck is out of alignment and it has a bow in it and it's pulling the wrong way. It's all that stuff. They do all that. And then, you know, your electronics, make sure the pots are in good shape. Maybe especially if you want to do like volume swells or something like that and your pots are scratchy. That's not going to do any, you know, let's bring it down. That's not going to do you any good. So make sure your pots are in good shape. And another simple thing, if your guitar has active electronics, is the battery fresh? You know, plug in, and it's like, you know, sometimes with actives especially, the guitar it'll still pass signal, it'll work, but you're like, huh, and then you get to that point where it's just about to die, and it's like, why does it sound so weird? And it's just like, and it's just, you know.
You realize you were tracking.
You realize you were tracking for half an hour with a bed. Yeah, exactly. So just simple stuff, you know, make sure the battery's fresh, make sure the electronics are in good shape, and I would highly recommend taking it to somebody or learning how to do it yourself. I mean, that's great. If you want to save money, very easy to learn how to do it yourself. So, also, another one in the studio, if you're making a whole record, you know, make sure you have enough strings. And again, this is all basic stuff, but just, you know, guitar players go, whoa, what? Especially when they're going for like really aggressive, like tight metal kind of stuff. You know, fresh strings, that's a big part of the attack of the guitar. You know, when
people get used to, like, musicians are poor, you know, they try not to change. They change a string if it breaks. But like when you're making a record, fresh strings have a huge effect on your guitar tone, a huge effect. And it's not like, all these guys probably try to talk you into saying, but it's part of my sound, like,
yeah, well, but I mean, but you know what? Some people,
sometimes it is, but
sometimes it is. I mean, I've worked with done sessions like R&B kind of stuff, and the bass players.
Right, they want dead strings.
They want dead strings.
Sound.
James Jamerson was a notorious guy, old famous Motown guy. He's been on a ton of Motown records. He would never change the strings unless one broke. And that was his sound, like that kind of dulled out, like that was his thing.
But typically.
And and then it's also jazz too, like duller strings, a lot of jazz guys, like, there's, but that's part of the thing, part of that sound, like, you don't want, especially if you're comping chords in jazz and you're moving around, fresh strings, you're going to get so much squeak. And then when they're all worn in, you're going to be smooth, you're going to be sliding through the chords and it's going to be great. And that's, they have to think about that kind of thing. But for when we're dealing with my thing, which is mostly rock and heavy stuff, you want fresh strings. You want to get that proper attack.
Definitely.
Your amps, same thing. Also the pots on the amp. Make sure that the pots aren't scratchy on the amp. Make sure all the pots work, because sometimes they get, especially live. If that's your live rig, things getting bumped around. All of a sudden it's like the one of the pots is bad and it's got a weird spot, a dead spot on the pot, and that might be the spot where the guitar is. More often than not, the dead spot that happens on the pot on the amp is the kind of like where it's been sitting, the sweet spot. So it's like, well, how do we dial that in? If right when we get to that point, it's like cutting in and out. So you got to make sure that the pots are all there. The tubes, make sure the tubes are in good shape. For the most part, tubes last for a fairly long time, but again. Especially when I'm working with guys and working with their live setup, and things get knocked around and tubes get little things in them and they loosen up from the bass and they wind up getting microphonic. So when they go microphonic, it'll really mess with your sound. And a quick and easy way to check with that is to not plug in the guitar, turn the amp on, off standby, and turn up the gain. Turn it up loud. And if it starts oscillating by itself without anything plugged in, that means your tubes have gone microphonic, and you need to figure out which one they are and replace them. And usually, if power tubes, you want to replace the whole set. Preamp tubes, you can get away with replacing just the bad one.
It's good to have extra preamp tubes.
It's good to have It's good to be prepared. It's good to have extra tubes in the studio just in case. We've had to do it.
Yeah, often when something's not working with your amp, it's just as simple as a preamp tube. Like that's really, it's not, so many people send these amps to get fit. They're like, we can't record there, we got to send our amp in and all this stuff. And it's a lot of times it's just a preamp tube.
It's very, sometimes it's very simple like that. Another way to check if the tubes are microphonic is also just like with the gain up, just tapping them slightly. And if they're microphonic, even with your finger, with your fingernail or just a pencil, the microphonic one, you will hear it. It'll ring in a different way, and you'll be able to tell. And then, you know what? Are the speakers in the cabinet all working? I know it's the simple stuff, but you'd be surprised more often than not. I come in and it's like, the guitar player goes, oh yeah, it's all working. And then it's like, nope, this speaker's dead. And out of a 412, one speaker will be dead. And it'll still pass down. The cabinet's going to obviously still work, and you can still mic it, but you know what? The ohmage of the cabinet is now different because that one speaker's dead. And that's going to affect the head, and that's going to affect how the head responds.
Usually with me, it's only one speaker working, if I'm lucky.
This is true.
The rest have holes in them.
No, but yeah, once you have a speaker that goes dead, then the actual ohmage changes, and it changes the response of the head. So, sometimes that's not a bad thing, but in general, as a good starting point, making sure all your speakers are working is a pretty good thing. So, strings and prep, and more into prep. Strings. It's really a lot of times it's based on player preference and it's based on feel. I know going on the bass player side of things, it's definitely a lot more thing, especially if I'm playing with my fingers. It's like different brands of strings are much harder, especially because the windings are bigger, and they're, sometimes it's about player comfort because some strings will really tear your fingers up if you don't have enough calluses. But it's really just the two main types for electric are nickel and steel, and generally steel has a little more of a brighter, edgier tone, and then nickel is a little bit. I mean, they're still bright, but they're warmer. You also have those coated strings, those elixirs, and they're interesting because they don't go dead as quick. So in the studio, that can be a time saver, but they're definitely different as a base. Like they don't go dead very easily, but they're never that bright.
Yeah, they don't start out very.
They're just consistent.
Yeah.
And that can work.
Yeah, and you can different strings have different shelf lives too, so you can kind of look online and compare like reviews on strings and things like that for what you'd want, and get a box and bring them in, because you'll have different goals, I guess. People have different goals with what strings they get.
Yeah, it's really, honestly, you got to really take it to yourself, because even like you said, among the strings, even all the same, like steel strings are all nickel strings. Certain ones are going to sound brighter to you, and certain ones, it's really a question of just preference, like, whatever, I'm using Ernie balls or, DRs or whatever. It's like, it's really whatever works for you. And again, it's part of player comfort, like those elixir strings, those coated strings. They're definitely nice feeling to play because they're smooth. But again, it's, I'm not necessarily preferential to them, but a lot of people swear by them. And I've done plenty of records that people use the elixirs, and I've gotten great guitar sounds with them. So, but it's more of a personal preference. And then moving on to picks and their impact on how the end tone is. Again, player preference, but I will say that depending on how hard you play and your style of attack on the strings, you should try and match the pick closer to what you're doing. Because my general rule of thumb, like I love like the Dunlop Tortex, the 75s, the yellow ones. They're kind of a mid-range. They're kind of like a good balance, and I always like especially for the mute picking stuff. I love the attack. They get a really nice, sharp, like good attack when you attack the string a certain way.
Those aren't really coated, are they?
No, they're not coated. No.
So that has an effect on it too.
But like for instance, Ben, he uses these. I always call them shingles from a house because they're these giant wedges. But he uses
chips.
these tortilla chips. But his are not 73s. They are the next thing up. I think 88s or 100s.
88s.
Yeah. So because Ben happens to play very, very hard and very aggressive, and we use the yellow ones too.
Yeah,
we use
the
thinner ones, and they can work for some things.
Definition,
but for some reason, these, and I won't ever. A lot of times, I'll tell players like, maybe you want to try a little bit of a thinner pick the next time through, because it might actually brighten up the tone. It might give you a little more attack. But for Ben this worked great for him. He's always used these, and this is what works. And we've switched up things for different sounds and
like
tonal
people
variations.
say, why would you use something so big? That's crazy. But it's like the end part, the tip, which is gonna connect with the strings, is the same as any other pick. Only I have 3 different options, 3 different ones. So as they get dull, I can keep turning it and keep using it. Plus, I
never even thought of that.
Live,
Funny.
I'm sweating and I'm playing so aggressively. I have more surface to grab onto. And then on top of that, like you said, I do play very aggressively. So having more surface to grab onto gives me more ability to really dive in and attack the string. So,
anchors it and attacks it.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of my tone. So it's preference.
And then muting strings. Well, we didn't even grab a thing.
What?
To wrap
Tupac?
up that. Yeah, we didn't. We never even grabbed that. So
I
anyway,
can take my sock off if you want.
But this is a big thing in the studio, and for instance, this can work to players' advantage, But this is a big thing on a very simple thing in the studio, especially with a split headstock, which is meaning like 3 on each side. The tuning pegs 3 on each side. What you get is this thing right here. That tendency, especially with an amp and especially with feedback, when you hear the sound coming in, this, when you're playing and you stop, you'll actually hear this thing resonate. It's almost like a reverb. And for the most part, there's times where you want that sound, but for the most part, for like tight rhythm kind of stuff, you generally don't want it. So we always wrap something, a piece of cloth. Some people use like a hair tie, they put it around there, but sometimes that's hard to get over the tuning pegs. But we take usually a piece of cloth, it could be even a tissue paper, and then tape it down and just muting the strings. So this is quiet.
Yeah, we prep the guitar to have more control over
another
what
one,
comes out.
very simple. I know it, and again, very simple, but clip the strings. Because that literally, they actually make noise, and you will actually hear that. And sometimes
things under there.
Sometimes, depending on the guitar and the length of the stop tail piece with the Tune-o-matic type style bridge, sometimes, like this one, it probably wouldn't be because it's a little shorter, but sometimes this, because this one's short, so there's not a lot of ring on this.
Yeah.
But some guitars. And the other version of that ESP, but some of them are. It's longer depending on the scale. Yeah. Also, they're much longer, and there's more chance for things to ring here. So we'll wind up like taping this off, or shoving a piece of foam in there, or anything. And it's just simple things like that.
Sometimes we'll even go as far as to put cloth. We'll open up the back of the guitar, unscrew it, and put cloth in the guitar.
Yep.
Because sometimes there's noise coming from things moving around in their springs.
Especially especially on guitars with a floating tremolo system. Yeah. The springs will actually, same thing. When you stop, the springs will resonate like a spring reverb. So you need to we'll shove foam in there and then put the cover back on.
And again, all those details add up.
All those little details that just so you can prep the guitar better for, just make sure that you're creating the best possible environment to achieve what you want. Sometimes you want those things to ring, and sometimes like when we play them, sometimes and you're grabbing you're hitting the headstock, and that's part of the sound, and that's part of what you're doing, but.
Ultimately, you're isolating just the strings, and I imagine that those. When you're damping those pieces, it does something to the actual string tone, but not too much altogether. Is that?
Yeah. Well, again, if it winds up choking it, then we wind up maybe let's loosen it up a little bit. Let's try and find a balance where we're not choking the tone out, because generally it's not gonna choke the tone out, muting it at the headstock like that. But yeah, you just have to always strike the balance, because if you wind up muting it too much, then it's not good, and then you wind up closing up the guitar. And honestly, but that's also going on even how the guitar is resonating when you're playing. If you're playing more like this, or you're playing standing up, that's a big thing, and I try to encourage that as much. Sometimes people do sit down because they want to focus on a little bit more if it's a technical part or whatever. But there's plenty of times I've had you stand up. It's like, stand up, play, let's go, because it's like that's what you do live. You're not sitting on a stool live unless you're Robert Fripp or somebody like that. Like, he sat on a stool, but most people don't. You need to. I'm trying to capture that thing, that intangible, that whatever that is that's live. The studio itself, in and itself can be a very sterile, kind of stifling, techie kind of environment, and I'm trying to just throw that out the window as much as I can, while still being able to technically capture the best tones. But we're trying to always really just get to that
Isolate
point.
What you are trying to achieve.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.